whole talk is live recorded on our ISKCON Boston channel. This is also live streamed on ISKCON Boston YouTube channel. So though many people have not joined here, they would be watching the YouTube channel, this particular talk. And also it will be there for other devotees to watch later at their leisure time. Thank you, Prabhu, once again. I appreciate that. And on behalf of entire ISKCON Boston, we express our deepest gratitude to you.
Thank you for having me. Hare Krishna. And so I guess before anything, my understanding is the occasion of this this meeting, it's part of a greater festival, at least an online festival, for Radha Gopi Vallabha's, what is it, 49th anniversary of installation. So if my math is correct, that's what, 1971?
Yes, Prabhu, July 1971. That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
it was,
so many years.
These deities were installed by Srila Prabhupada, and His Holiness Satswarup Maharaj, he assisted Srila Prabhupada in installing the Radha Gopala. So there are a lot of memories, and tomorrow His Holiness Satswarup Maharaj will be sharing those memories with us.
Oh, wow, wonderful. I'll try to make a point to definitely tune in for that.
Yeah, sorry.
Maharaj has a wealth of knowledge and history with so many of our temple deities around North America, particularly. Wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for those of you who are attending now, and thank you for those of you who are tuning into a recorded version of this. I've been asked to speak a little bit about home deity worship. I have a presentation here that I normally offer like in the context of a Sunday feast type program. So given on time, we'll try to abbreviate it a little bit. Also, I'm keeping an eye on group chat. So if there's any potential questions that come along the way, feel free to message on the group chat and I'll try to address them. Otherwise, we'll try to take some questions at the end of the presentation. So that's the plan. Here we go. First of all, Namom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani Nirvishesha Shunyavare Paschatyadesatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So home deity worship. Many of us have deities at home, of course. And so this is a particularly relevant topic whenever I visit temples. Home deity worship is oftentimes one of the primary requests to discuss. So first of all, we want to talk about some basics. Some introduction aspects that we'll talk about are definition of Arcana or deity worship, why we perform it, the differences between these terms you've probably heard of before, Pancaratrika-vidhi Bhagavata-vidhi, understanding the essential nature of the Lord in his deity form, what qualifications we have for deity worship, particularly home worship, the position of the spiritual master as it relates to deity worship, and then also we'll touch on various standards, understanding the different standards, procedures, particularly between home worship, temple worship. And then we'll also get into very practical aspects, like, okay, what to do in terms of altar setup at home. What deities should I have at home? What should I do when I travel? All of these aspects. So we'll just get right into it. So first of all, there's a very technical definition of deity worship that acharyas have given us. Specifically, Srila Rupa Goswami gives in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu this definition that we have here. Surinyasari purvanga karma nirvaha purvakam archanam tupacharanam shan mantre no papadanam. He says, Archana is defined as the offering of articles of worship, upacharas, with mantra, after having performed preliminary purificatory activities, purvanga karmas, such as bhuta, suddhi, and nyasas. So this is, you could say, a technical definition of deity worship. And then we can juxtapose this definition with the essence of what deity worship is all about, where Srila Prabhupada states in a Bhagavatam class in Paris that deity worship means to fix up your mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, always worshiping Krishna. So the point of me starting this discussion with these two definitions is to, offer a synthesis. There's the technical aspect, as Srila Rupa Goswami mentions, and then there's the overall bhav or mood or intention, fundamental, reasoning for deity worship, and that is to make us become more Krishna conscious, to purify us, always fix our mind up on the lotus feet of Krishna. So when we put these two aspects together, we get, I guess you could say, a complete picture of what deity worship is all about. And then in terms of why we perform it, many of us are familiar with the, out of the 64, activities of devotional service, there's these 5 that are mentioned as primary. And we have hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Sadhu Sangha, living in a sacred place, specifically Mathura is mentioned, chanting the holy name of the Lord, and then, of course, finally, serving the deity form of the Lord. Actually, it's mentioned not only serving the deity form of the Lord, but with faith, Shraddha, it's particularly mentioned. So even though we understand that the Yuga Dharma is chanting the holy name of the Lord, and this is our primary sadhana, we understand from the Acharyas, and particularly more contemporarily, Srila Prabhupada, that this deity worship is so important. So although he emphasized so much the chanting the holy names, why did he go to all the trouble to establish all these temples? And the reason is because this is an important primary auxiliary sadhana to chanting of the holy name. And actually it can have a positive effect in purifying our minds and our bodies in order to go deeper into the holy name. So it's interesting, out of all those 64 items of devotional service, there's a good 36 total of the 64 that are directly related to deity worship. And then we have this aspect of Pancaratrika-vidhi and Bhagavata-vidhi. So we see this picture of the train tracks, these rails, and many of you are familiar with this analogy, I'm sure. So we can understand the Pancaratrika-vidhi to be one rail and the Bhagavata-vidhi to be the other. And they're both going parallel. And so for our intents and purposes, this Pancaratrika-vidhi that we're speaking of is deity worship, and this Bhagavat-vidhi, it's so many things, but we can understand it to be primarily hearing and chanting. And so the point is, we as the trains, so to speak, by going along these 2 rails and having our wheels, our attention focused on both of these aspects simultaneously, they will take us to the ultimate destination without fail. So they're both going on. Not that we, even though it's true, in principle, simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, that's all we need. But in this day and age, it's mentioned in Bhakti Sandarbha. Jiva Goswami mentions, and Prabhupada's giving this explanation in translation in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where in principle, clearly chanting the holy name is sufficient, but in practice, especially in this day and age, because of our polluted minds and getting bombarded with everything, and what to speak of, they're saying this some 500 years ago. Think about how things have changed and how we're getting blasted left and right with so much marketing and advertising and suggestions here and there. That while in principle chanting the holy name is sufficient, in practice, in this day and age, deity worship is practically required in order for us to help purify us, to steady our minds so that we're able to go deeper into the holy name. So that's the relationship. If you wanted to read that purport where Srila Prabhupada is explaining Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sundarbha in this respect, you'll find it in Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verse 152 purport. Okay. He states, sometimes neophyte devotees think that they can continue the Shravana Kirtana process without worshiping the deity. But the execution of Shravana Kirtana is meant for highly developed devotees like Haridas Thakur, who engaged in the Shravana Kirtana process without worshiping the deity. However, one should not falsely imitate Haridas Thakur and abandon deity worship just to try to engage in Shravana Kirtana. Okay, so now that we gave a brief overview of the inner relationship between these primary sadhanas that we have in our devotional service repertoire, now let's move on and talk about how the Lord is present in his deity form. Depending upon whether you're a personalist or a Mayavadi, an impersonalist, and so on, there's different conceptions about what this three-dimensional form is. Some will say, oh, it's a representation of the Lord, whereas we as devotees understand it to be an actual form of the Lord, an incarnation of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada mentions here that worship of the Archa Vigraha is not idol worship. When we say idol worship here, many of those who hailed from India, this term idol is not seen as a derogatory term. But in the West, particularly those who come from a Judeo-Christian background, the term idol as it's used in the Bible and elsewhere it means like some false god, some concocted form of God that's improper worship. So in that light, Srila Prabhupada says the Archa Vigraha is not idol worship. The Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Lord in a form appreciable by a devotee. Therefore, devotees engage in the temple in the service of the Lord as Archa Vigraha, a form made of stula, material objects such as stone, metal, wood, jewels, or paint. All of these are called stula, or physical representations. Since the devotees follow the regulative principles of worship, even though the Lord is there in his physical form, he is non-different from his original spiritual form. Thus, the devotee gets the benefit of achieving the ultimate goal of life, that is to say, becoming always absorbed in the thought of the Lord. This is a excerpt from Bhagavatam purport, Canto 4, Chapter 12, verse 17. And also, I should have this set up where we can play a little audio.
And if you think it is brass made dull, I am to say, idol. Jijathamang prapadanti tang sathaiva bhajam. If you think this is a brass made idol, then it will remain a brass made idol to you forever. But if you elevate yourself to higher platform of Krishna consciousness, then this Krishna will talk with you. This Krishna will talk with you.
Okay. So we understand the deity form of the Lord to be a mercy incarnation of the Lord. Because we don't have the spiritual senses manifest and able to perceive and interact, we understand that the Lord comes in the deity form in order for us to have a direct relationship and develop a direct mood of service. Another primary topic that I mentioned that we would discuss is the position of the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada emphasized the position of the spiritual master repeatedly. And here's a nice quote from a lecture that he gave in 71. just a few months before Radha Gopi Vallabha was installed, it looks like. This would be February 15th. He says the process is that whatever we offer to the deity, that is offered to Guru, and Guru offers to his Guru. In this way, it goes to Krishna. We don't directly offer Radha Krishna, no. We have no right. Neither he accepts in that way. The pictures of the acharyas, why there are. Actually, one has to offer the plate to his Guru, and he'll offer to his Guru. He offers to his Guru, his Guru. In this way, it'll go to Krishna. That is the process. You cannot directly approach Krishna or other subordinates to Krishna. That is not possible. So Prabhupada super emphasized this, and we see it practically speaking, how it manifested in his directions for when we offer bhoga. So when we offer food stuff or bhoga to the deities, he gave this specific instruction to chant pranam prayers of the spiritual master, pranam for Lord Chaitanya, and pranam for Krishna. Even in Gaudiya Math, during Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's time, this wasn't the process as far as we understand. We would simply, idam navedyam in the Mula mantra of the deity, and that's it. But in the case of ISKCON and how Srila Prabhupada from the very beginning instructed devotees to offer bhoga, it was following the mood of this instruction that he gives from this lecture in 71. And actually these same instructions you'll find in letters going back into the, I believe 69 even, where he's giving some of the earliest instructions of how to offer the bhoga. And so the point is, the meditation is that we are focusing on this spiritual master and we're offering this bhoga to the spiritual master, and the spiritual master will then offer it to his spiritual master, and it goes up through the parampara ultimately to Krishna. And this is a very safe system because, who are we to directly approach Krishna? So by at least having this mood that, no, we're just in the service of the spiritual master and let the spiritual master take it from there. This is what Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing. And so along these lines, we hear discussion about how Prabhupada is mentioning the spiritual master is the via medium and going through the parampara, and he's the one connecting us. And I have a nice video here of Srila Prabhupada in Australia where he's speaking on 2 points. First of all is this aspect of the position of the spiritual master and the disciple. And then also the nature, the importance of deity worship and how it's not idol worship.
Therefore, the Vidhi Marga means to work under the direction of the spiritual master. Just like apprentice in a factory, one is working as apprentice, he does not know how to. But gradually, when he becomes practice, then he gets a good job, good salary. Is it not? Similarly, this is apprenticeship. To rise early in the morning, offer Mangalarati and Bhog, these are so many rules and regulations. Then naturally, there will be a spontaneous love. In the beginning, there is no spontaneous love. One has to work under the direction of the spiritual master and Shastra, scripture.
Yes, they were saying that this was then a form of idol worship because there was no realization in the service.
No. Even there is no realization. It is not idol. It is idol worship for the rascal, not for the devotee. A devotee, under the direction of a spiritual master, is engaged in the service of the deity. The idea is that you cannot approach the Supreme Lord in your present condition. Therefore, he has agreed to take your service just like a stone. You can handle stone, you can handle, but you cannot handle the Virat Rupa, the gigantic form. Where it is his mercy. Just like I have given this example many times, just like a small letter box. It is a post office. But for your facility, it is a box. It is post office. Actually, it is post office. You put the letter and it will go 10,000 miles away. How it goes? Huh? How it goes?
It goes to the GPO and then it was dispatched.
That's all right, because it is authorized.
Yes.
Therefore, the work is being done. You don't think I put it in a small box. It has gone to the post office and work is going on. Similarly, for your facility, Krishna has appeared before you as stone, as wood. But stone is also Krishna. That requires little brain. He can take service in any form. That is absolute. Because the stone is not different from Krishna. It is Krishna's energy. So he is able to take service from you in any way. Therefore, you have to approach him authorizedly. If you imitate a small box in your, write simply the same letter box red, that will not go. That will stay there for millions of years. But the box which is authorized, that will go. Is it clear? Yeah. Tell these rascals. This is not idol worship.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That's one of my favorite videos of Srila Prabhupada discussing deity worship. The next fundamental point to speak of is mood of worship. Srila Prabhupada emphasized particularly in Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 24, verses 45, 46. It's quite a long purport there. And he's emphasizing the Vidhi Marg, or rules and regulations. We understand in different sampradayas, different lines, how there's this continuum or range where some lines will focus more on the rules and regulations, whereas others will have some greater emphasis on the bhav or the mood. So the Sri Sampradaya and the Madhvas, they're more focused on the rules and regulations. And we find that there tends to be a little more emphasis amongst the Vallabhas and in our line even on the bhav, on the mood. Although that's the case, Srila Prabhupada also cautioned us not to take things cheaply, because there is this concern, and it can be seen, it's evident in the past as well as in more contemporary times, that there's this he'd use the term sahaja. Such persons are called sahaja, who take it easily, or simply. So here's a few excerpts from that purport. They're disjointed in the sense that they're sentences that are taken from 3 different sections of the purport. But he says, without serving Krishna according to Vidhi Marg, regulative principles of the Pancaratrika-vidhi, unscrupulous persons want to jump immediately to the Rag Marg principles. Such persons are called sahaja. Another one, one should strictly follow the Vidhi Marg regulative principles in the worship of Lakshmi Narayan. Although the Lord is present in the temple as Radha Krishna. Radha Krishna includes Lakshmi Narayan. Therefore, when one worships the Lord according to the regulative principles, the Lord accepts the service and the role of Lakshmi Narayan. And finally, if we do not follow the regulative principles on the Vidhi Marg platform and keep our eyes trained to spot offenses, we will not make progress. So just to be clear, and as evidenced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, if you read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, our goal is not, to be just stuck on this Vidhi Marg. The idea is this Vidhi Marg is a step that once we successfully go through this stage, we get to the good stuff, the better stuff, which is, he's talking about these Ragmark principles. Unscrupulous persons want to jump immediately to the Ragmark principles. So the idea is that we want to get to a point where we're performing our deity worship or serving the Lord purely out of devotion, and not because, the scriptures or our spiritual masters say this is a good thing for us to do, to put it simply. Okay, so when we're serving their lordships, particularly in the temple, it's very much this dasya ras, where we're serving, in the mood of a servant, and Radha Krishna are dealt with in the mood. It's very much like that of Lakshmi Narayan, very formal, kingly worship, Ashvarya. Now in home worship, what we do in our homes to some extent is, our business, but in the temple specifically, this is what we're following. In the home as well, not that we ignore this rule by any means, but depending upon the level that the individual devotee at home is, will at some point there will be some graduation from simply Vidhi Marg, where they'll then move into these Rag Marg platform to some extent. The point is no matter what level devotees in the temple may be, because it's a temple, it's a public space as opposed to a private space like at home, no matter what level someone may be on, they need to strictly follow the Vidhi Marg principles. Otherwise, it can become a disturbance to the other devotees, other pujaris, and so on. And then what discussion can we have on home worship, deity worship in general, without talking about cleanliness and regulation? Oftentimes we hear Srila Prabhupada talking about cleanliness and punctuality. Punctuality is not so much of a concern when it comes to home worship. Temple worship, definitely. But it's understood in the temple we're 100% on Krishna's time, and at the home, the timing largely revolves around the needs of the family. So in terms of the cleanliness, Prabhupada has this letter that we always like to quote from 1970 to Mother Rukmini, where he's talking about how deity worship means to be very, very clean. Try to bathe twice daily. The deity should never be approached without having bathed first, and so on. And in the end here, he says, the idea is summit cleanliness. That will satisfy Krishna. Summit means topmost, like the summit of a mountain, means the very peak, the very topmost. You can't go any higher. So always aspiring for that is the mood that we wish to develop. And now let's start talking a little bit about some home worship aspects, particularly. It's mentioned how householders or grihastas should perform deity worship. Out of all the ashrams, the grihastas are understood to primarily cover the deity worship. Prabhupada states in this purport from 7th Canto Bhagavatam, he says, an opulent householder can collect luxurious paraphernalia for deity worship, and consequently for householder devotees, the worship of the deity is compulsory. So compulsory, that's a fancy word for saying it's a must. It has to happen. In our Krishna consciousness movement, there are brahmacharis, grihastas, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis, but the deity worship in the temple should be performed especially by the householders. The brahmacharis can go with the sannyasis to preach, and the vanaprasthas should prepare themselves for the next status of renounced life, sannyas. Grihasta devotees, however, are generally engaged in material activities, and therefore, if they don't take the deity worship, their falling down is positively assured. So there you have it. Prabhupada's basically saying, if you're grihasta, you have to engage in deity worship, and if you don't You're falling down as positively assured. Pretty strong statement. And one thing that's important to understand is while Prabhupada is saying householders have to engage in deity worship, there's also this other concern that Prabhupada had, where he's saying householders should not neglect the temple deities. Even early on in the 70s in Los Angeles, there was, devotees who are living in apartments just, a few doors down from the temple, starting to set up their own altars at home with deities and getting into that. And Prabhupada cautioned them and was actually quite concerned that the temple deity worship would get neglected. So one thing that we always want to advocate and get across strongly whenever we're offering these home discussions on home worship to congregations within our ISKCON temples is that the principal deities to serve would be the temples of the deity, temple deities at the temple. Prabhupada would quote things saying, like this is even 1969, I think it is best if everyone centers his attention on the deity in the temple, and in that way the temple worship will pull on nicely. Of course, if the temple is unapproachable or too far, that is a different thing. But if the temple is easily accessible, then this is the best program. So based on this, we understand that the paradigm from, so many devotees only living in the temples back in the, 70s to the congregation model that we have now, where most of you are living outside of the temple and it takes some time to get to the temple. Therefore, Prabhupada does give us the license to have deities at home and to have worship at home because we're not able to go regularly. But I would caution, even though that's the case, it's not that we neglect responsibilities and the need of services and serving the deities at the temple, neglecting the temple deities for the reasoning that, oh, but I have my deities at home, so I need to take care of them instead. That's not the mood Srila Prabhupada was going for. Another letter from 74, as far as Grihastas worshiping Gaura-Nitai deities, that is only for those who live far away from the temple and cannot attend. Otherwise, such worship is redundant. There is already deity worship going on in the temple, and they should attend the artis, not install their own deities. The householding community in Los Angeles or any of our temples is not meant to be independent from the temple program. Okay, so it's pretty clear that Prabhupada was concerned that the temple worship goes on nicely. And we see, practically speaking, as we visit temples, not only in North America, but worldwide, except for some of the few primary temples, there is oftentimes, a concern for having all the services covered. And, not all of you may be Brahmin initiated and all that, but that's okay. There's an aspect of supporting the temple worship in so many different ways. Some of you may be engaged in backup services in the pujari room, making garlands, assisting in the kitchen, what have you. So the point is one way, some way, shape, or form or the other, we should connect and engage in supporting the temple deities. And so on this occasion of the 49th anniversary, this is a wonderful opportunity for those of you who may have some additional time and energy to offer to recommit yourselves and take up something, an extra hour a week or something like that, being able to go to the temple and offer some sort of service, whatever it may be. But the point is that's very pleasing to their lordships. And then of course, Srila Prabhupada, this is what he clearly wanted. Okay. Now let's talk about some preliminary home worship considerations. So there's things like the home altar, the arrangement. We get asked lots of questions about the location. What we find, a constant, a common denominator to be whenever we're asked these questions, it all depends on your facility that you have at home. where the home's at, how many rooms you have, do you have young children in the home, where's your kitchen, where's, so many things. So there's not like one set rule. Generally, it's nice if you're able to give the deities, a most comfortable space, a space with, nice light, it's comfortable. A place also that when it comes to the devotees, the householders at the home, offering boga and whatnot, that it's convenient. Probably having a like a deity room or an altar upstairs or downstairs from the kitchen would not be so convenient, going up and down the stairs. So you might want to have the altar, in a central location, like the family room, as we call it. So perhaps in the main area, but the family dynamics may, and then also facility of the house, there might be a bedroom that can be made into an altar room that would be more suitable. So it all really depends on, what's going on, what activity, and in terms of how high or low the altar may be, the arrangement of the altar. If you have really young children, obviously you want to take care that they're not able to grab the deities. They need to be out of reach, so to speak. And then there's this aspect of deities, having deities, murtis, as opposed to a picture altar. We understand in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, it's mentioned how the deity form of the Lord can come in 8 forms. And one of those forms is paint. We can understand paint to mean pictures, something like photos, paintings like that. And there's no distinction made in Shastra between, a painting of the Lord and a 3-dimensional form. However, Srila Prabhupada did seem to make a distinction, and I think some other groups or sampradayas also make this a similar distinction from what little I understand, that having a picture altar does not connotate or require the same level of commitment and service daily that a deity would. So having a picture altar means that it gives you a place to offer worship. So many different services you'll be offering, doing boga offerings, arti, chanting, kirtan, all this in front of the pictures. Bathing and dressing, not so easy to do. Some have done it, but not so easy to do. But aside from that, all these services can go on. And there's it gives one the flexibility, especially if you're traveling or you have a hectic schedule, and having some kind of regulated services is a little challenging. You're often away. Then having a picture altar gives one that, shall we say, flexibility to be able to travel and so forth. Because the idea is, when we have deities in the home, while our mood is primarily this awe and reverence, we can also understand, the analogy or the relationship as if we're taking care of a child. Not that one day when we don't feel like it or it's inconvenient that we, don't feed the child, we don't, offer any attention and so on. So similarly, when it comes to having our deities at home, we want to maintain that worship no matter what. So if we're not able to personally do it, we entrust it to a family member. If that's not possible, then there's other options as well. But the idea is that we're developing a personal relationship of love and service, and we need to maintain what we can. Now, does that mean you're offering 6 offerings and artis a day? Absolutely not. Very few householders are able to offer that kind of that amount of worship. What's important, and what Srila Prabhupada even emphasized to Malati Devi when he gave his personal Radha Krishna deities to her at one point, was whatever you do, maintain it. Basically be regulated. One of the benefits of deity worship, aside from, as I mentioned before, developing, a personal relationship and mood of service, and being able to, actually offer, different items and whatnot. It also develops, particularly for the householder, this regulation in one's spiritual life. It helps us to become regulated. So if we didn't have deities, we might not be as regulated about, what and when we cook, or when we wake up, what have you. So in that light, having deities at home helps us to definitely regulate us. And so with that, when we are, going through sometimes our crazy lives, and we have whatever work responsibilities and family responsibilities and all that, we need to do our best to, make sure that the deities are given the attention they need. And also that means that we don't establish some very high standards or high level of worship that can be quite challenging to be maintained. That goes for our temple worship as well as our home worship. As the title of this presentation, the title slide, it said simple and sublime. So having more complicated worship or more intricate worship, more mantras, more mudras, more offerings, all that doesn't necessarily mean more bhakti. It can, but what Krishna is really looking for is the mood behind it. So we want to set ourselves up for success when it comes to this, primary auxiliary sadhana of deity worship, by establishing, a level of worship at the home that we're able to realistically maintain. And then we have the question of children in deity worship. So we have here where Prabhupada's stating that deity worship can be learned at not less than 10 years of age. Before that, they can assist. They can learn how to bow down, how to dance, how to chant, how to make garlands, clean arti utensils, etc. These are also different parts of deity worship. So this is from 71. And the way I understand that is that, he's saying not less than 10 years of age. It seems to indicate that he's saying, intending to convey that they can be unsupervised as early as 10 years of age to do some services. And before that, he's basically indicating that the parents should engage and, acclimate their children to deity worship, from the very beginning. And they're assisting with making garlands and cleaning things and all that. But in terms of, learning how to do perhaps a bhoga offering and an arti and all that, he's saying that not less than 10 years of age. And then another very relevant aspect when it comes to home worship is what to do with your deities when you need to travel. So I touched on this just a couple minutes ago. And I guess there's like good, better, best scenarios. The idea, the principle is that you want to, you want to introduce the least inconvenience to the deities when you need to travel. So that means if you're normally doing the worship, then hopefully there's another family member in the same home, if they're there and available, that they can engage in the worship. If that's not an option, then perhaps there's family or friends that live nearby where you can take your deities to their homes while you're gone in your absence. And that way the worship can go on there. Point is to do your best to have the worship go on. Some devotees, if the deities are smaller, they'll take them with them and engage in, maintain the worship wherever they go. That's an option as well. And then you get into these less ideal scenarios where sometimes devotees will simply, they need to go, they need to travel, there's something pressing, and they're not able to find care otherwise. So they'll potentially offer some kind of drive foodstuffs, fruit and nuts before the deities. I understood that Yamuna Devi, who was, what wonderful example of pioneer of ISKCON and foremost pujari and cook. My understanding is that there's a point where she would travel with pictures of her deities and she would offer manasa puja. So even though she wasn't physically there with her deities and couldn't take her deities with her, she would offer some manasa puja. So that's a wonderful expression of love and dedication and service that can be considered as well. But the general, as a general rule, you want to do your best to have the worship go on with or without you, with having the least inconvenience to the deities in your absence. Okay. And in conclusion, I have this wonderful clip from Srila Prabhupada that I always like to play.
Real thing is bhakti. What you can offer to Krishna, everything belongs to Krishna. What you have got, what is your value? And what is the value of your things? There is nothing. Therefore, the real thing is bhaktya. Real thing is your feeling. Krishna, kindly take it. I have no qualification. I am most rotten fallen. But I have brought this thing for you. Please take. This will be accepted. Don't be perturbed. Always be careful. You are dealing with Krishna. That is my request.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this was just a quick, brief taste of some aspects of home worship, and most of our time was discussing fundamentals of deity worship in general, and then how they relate and feed into home worship. We have some multiple segments of home worship discussion on our YouTube channel. So if you're to go to YouTube and you type in ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry, you'll find that there are, we have one playlist that's particularly multiple aspects of home worship, where we get more into the procedures, bog offerings and arti, and a lot of the things that I just brushed on, those will be talked in more discussion. So please visit our ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry YouTube site and subscribe. We're, especially nowadays, we're working towards developing more and more content. We're also, I'm going to proactively let you all know that we're working on some home worship courses, actual online courses, as opposed to just like, content videos where there's assessment and all that. So we're obviously seeing the need for that in this day and age, and we're working towards that. So that's up and coming. And finally, if you wish to support us in any way, that'd be greatly appreciated, especially now that we're not able to travel to temples, and many of the temples are struggling as well. If you can some way find yourselves able to somehow offer some assistance, whether that be financially, or perhaps you have some technical talents that you'd be interested in sharing or offering to us in the development of curriculum or online trainings and whatnot, feel free to approach us. In the event that you did want to offer any kind of contribution, large or small, there's a link on ISKCON Deity, or the YouTube page for ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry, in the banner where it says please donate, and it takes you right to PayPal. And there is we're 501c3, we're a nonprofit organization in North America. So you're able to offer your donations through PayPal, and they're tax deductible. Okay, so with that, we're going to, the balance of the time here, I'm going to stop screen sharing. And with the balance of the time that we have here, happy to answer any kind of questions we may have. Anyone?
Prabhu, there are some questions which are typed in the chat window. Maybe if you open the chat.
Okay. Okay. So Induleka Mataji says, what does it mean, other subordinates to Krishna? Induleka Mataji, maybe you can help me recall what the context is. I remember hearing that word, but I don't remember if it was in the context of one of the videos where Prabhupada was talking.
Like the offering first through spiritual master and through parampara to Krishna. And like Krishna subordinates are not approachable with otherwise. So I was just thinking, what does it mean, like other subordinates, like other spiritual masters?
It could also be associates of the Lord. I'd have to look at the quote exactly, but you know, we can understand Radharani even to be a subordinate of Krishna in this sense. So there's the Lord, and always the Lord has, you know, his associates there as well. So we can understand, you know, in the case of, you know, Sitaram, you have Hanuman, Lakshman, they're considered subordinates as well, associates. So that might be what's being meant there.
So as long as you go through your spiritual master, that takes care of that, like he takes care of. Right?
Exactly. We don't have to worry about the rest. We offer it to our spiritual master, and it's understood that we've done our part.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then another question, let's see, from NNDD, Manasa Puja. Okay, so I touched on like Yamuna Devi and Manasa Puja. Manasa Puja, for those of you who might not be aware, that means offering worship in the mind. So we have Bhaya Puja, which means like external worship of articles, and then Manasa Puja. Oftentimes in the course of our worship, more elaborate worship, we're offering, we're going through and we're offering different upacharas or items in the mind, and that's Manasa Puja. It's active. We're doing the worship, but we're meditating. We're doing it internally. One of the 8 elements that are mentioned in Bhagavatam chapter 27, where Krishna is instructing Uddhava on the process of deity worship, how to worship Krishna in his deity form. One of the 8 elements is the mind. So the worship of the Lord in the form of mind. So we can understand that to refer to us installing the Lord in our mind, in our consciousness, in our meditation, and worshiping him like that internally. So Manasa Puja. Directions the deity should face. Primarily we're given the instruction that ideally the deities should face eastward. Yeah, I'm glad this question came up because I didn't get into that much when it came to altar location. I would emphasize that, yeah, if the layout of your home will facilitate having the deities face eastward, great. But it shouldn't be a primary consideration if, you know, facing the deities eastward means that they're looking at a wall, right? So take that into consideration. If you have 2 good options and one is where the deities are facing eastward and the other one isn't, then you might want to lean towards that. But there's so many other considerations as well. When offering bhoga, what exactly are the basic prayers and how many times should each be repeated, in what order? Okay, good question. So I can share with you all some procedures for very, very simplified basic home worship procedures. And within that, there's the bhoga offering. And so the 3 prayers they're pranam prayers. It's quite unique in that pranam prayers are a category where we're offering glorification and obeisances, stuti, stotra. It's normally a concluding activity of deity worship. However, Srila Prabhupada emphasized, because he was emphasizing the mood that we don't approach Krishna directly, he gave this specific instruction, which is not shall we say, orthodox, or it's a unique instruction that he gave where he's asking us to chant the pranam prayers of the spiritual master 3 times, pranam prayers of Lord Chaitanya 3 times, and pranam prayers of Krishna 3 times. So specifically, Prabhupada's pranam, Namo Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasaya Bhutale, and so on. So you chant that 3 times. If you have a Diksha Guru, you're formally aspiring in given the blessings to chant the pranam mantra for your spiritual master, then what we do is we have a 4th mantra. So many of us are formally initiated. So chant the pranam mantra of your Diksha Guru, your initiating spiritual master 3 times, then Srila Prabhupada 3 times, then Lord Chaitanya's Namo Mahavadanya Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Krishna Namaha 3 times. And then the Krishna mantra is Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanhitaya Chajagaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Chant that 3 times. And so the idea of the meditation is that the bhoga, it's being offered directly to our initiating spiritual master. If we don't have initiating spiritual master, then directly to Prabhupada. And then, Prabhupada is going up the parampara to Lord Chaitanya, and like Lord Chaitanya up to Radha Krishna. Which deities would be good to start with for home worship? Gaur Nitai, for sure. Gaur Nitai are most merciful. That doesn't mean that we take the worship lightly or that it's okay, they'll take offenses, I can offend them left and right, no problem. It's not that we should have that mood. But for sure, Radha Krishna worship, we understand to be the highest, most serious worship. And so in most of our homes, Gaur Nitai worship is what's primarily advocated, you could say. And that being said, regardless of what deities you may be inspired to worship at home, it's good to first get the blessings of your authorities. So if you are initiated, you inquire from your spiritual master, get permission from them. Otherwise, you may have some Shiksha Gurus, some local authorities that you're taking shelter under. Seek their guidance. And they may find that you're in a time and a space, and it would be suitable and good for your development in bhakti. Otherwise, maybe it's not just the right time yet. At a minimum, you can have a picture altar for sure, but definitely check in with those who have a personal relationship with you and have a good understanding of your facilities and whatnot. How to serve Tulsi Maharani apart from Tulsi Arti every day and making sure she is well nurtured. That's about it. Srila Prabhupada, just encouraged this Tulsi Arti aside from normal physical care in terms of watering and things like that. That's completely sufficient. While offering incense sticks, flowers during worship, I've heard that the number of these items during worship can be either 1 or 3 or 5 or 7, and many devotees offer only 1 flower or incense during worship, which I've heard practices by the Mayavadis or the impersonalists. Can you please clarify this? Interesting. I haven't heard any attribution to impersonalists only offering 1 as opposed to personalists or anything like that. As you mentioned, oftentimes, at least in terms of these like arti paraphernalia, incense, dhupa deep and all that, you often see odd numbers. A single stick of incense I'm not aware of any prohibition or reason why you can't offer just one stick of incense. And particularly, you know, when we're in small areas, smaller homes and all that, it's just frankly, you know, unless there's good ventilation, it gets quite strong when you have more than that. So, you know, no issue with one. You can do, and yeah, you can do as many as you want. Flowers, you know, oftentimes even in the temples, we'll offer one nice flower, like one nice rose for the arti or something like that. And particularly with flowers, when you get into like the larger quantities, for instance, like in Mayapur, we'll have a thali like, you know, this big, and you'll have probably 50, 60 sunflowers. It's not that we're counting them, making sure it's an odd number. It doesn't matter. So don't worry about that. But you know, when we're talking about lamps and incense sticks and these, you know, 1 or 3 or 5, yeah, generally we'll do an odd number like that. How should you chant if you're offering incense? For example, if I have a picture of the 6 Goswamis and Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, what do I chant specifically to them and to Nrsingadev besides the specific chants for Srila Prabhupada, Gauranitai, Radhakrishna? Thank you. All our altars are unique, and particularly in our homes, we'll have multiple different personalities. And so even in our ISKCON temples, sometimes there's confusion in terms of the order of how from one personality to another that we offer the items. And you're talking about chanting. So in more elaborate worship, we have these mula mantras that we're offering. These mula mantras are given, you know, it's an aspect of getting, you know, in ISKCON what we call second initiation, which is or Brahman initiation, otherwise technically known as mantra diksha. So you have Harinam initiation and Brahman initiation or mantra diksha. So the idea is when you're getting this second initiation, that's when you're given the license, formal license to offer deity worship, you know, in the temples. And with that, we're given mantras. Some are Vedic, some are Pancaratrika, and some of these Pancaratrika mantras are to worship particularly Lord Chaitanya and Krishna. And so we invoke those mula mantras when we're offering the items. You know, if you don't have them yet, that's okay. And so actually many of the devotees, many of the Prabhupada disciples, these mantras during artis weren't even established until some years later. In terms of order, that's another thing when it comes to arti. I don't want to confuse some of us out there, and because some will be like, oh, I did it this way, I'm doing it wrong now. So the point is, I can talk about principles as opposed to like practice. The internal mood is just like we mentioned how Prabhupada said that we can't approach Krishna directly, right? So the internal mood, despite whatever we may be doing externally with, you know, who we wave the incense at first or last, the internal mood is that we don't approach Krishna directly. We're serving on behalf of our spiritual masters in the parampara, and so on. So oftentimes we'll present, we'll show, offer the incense to the ideas we offer to spiritual master first. And then from there, the mood is that we're, you know, the item, just like with the Bhog offering, where it's explained, Prabhupada saying is he offers to his guru, and up through the parampara. So similarly, there's that meditation that, no, I'm not just skipping over my guru and everyone else and offering directly to Krishna. No, we're having this internal mood that we're assisting our spiritual master, and he's guiding us, directing us, and it's going up through the parampara like that. So internally, that's the mood. And it becomes prasadam once we offer it to the main deity. Why? Because even though we may be presenting or offering all these items, whether it be food stuff in the course of a Bhog offering or in the course of an item, we may be offering these things, presenting whatever semantics, terminology you want to use, but the idea is that the spiritual master or these subordinates to Krishna are not enjoying those things for themselves. They're actually passing it up. So it goes to the main deity, we'll offer to the main deity, and then it'll be distributed as prasadam after that. Now the question we get into is, oh, but I have Radha Krishna, I have Gaur Nitai, I have Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, I have Nrsimhadev, so many deities. And just to simplify things, you're one pujari and you have this item and you offer to Radha Krishna. Well, Jagannath is another form of Krishna, but we, offer the prasadam to Shakti Tattva Radharani. So now we're going back to Krishna again, especially for home worship in the context of, this conversation. We just want to keep it simple. The mood is that we have some item that we want to offer for the Lord's pleasure. And we have the mood that we're not offering it directly to the Lord, but through the parampara. So we'll offer it to the deities, from the spiritual master, we'll offer it to all the deities. And then Tulsi Devi may be there, offer it to Tulsi Devi. And then you can offer some circles to the parampara, maybe the 6 Goswamis are there and also the more contemporary parampara, offer to them and then to the assembled devotees like that. What is the concept theory behind odd numbers? Good question. It's considered to be, more auspicious, but I've never found anything in, any Shastra, Niti Shastra, or anywhere else. I'm sure there's something there, but that may be a good question for some of the pundits. I'm not one of them. And then we have Indulekha Mataji saying, I would like to share something that is very nice to do before one gets deities. This instruction was given by His Holiness Niranjan Swami, and I think it's very useful to everyone. Yeah, please, Indulekha Mataji, please come on and share this point.
Okay, so this is Niranjana Swami's disciple who lives in Orlando, so she cannot see him often, and she wanted to get Radha Krishna deities. So I was kind of in between of them. And he said, please tell her first to pray to Radharani, to come to her for a year or so. And in this way, she will develop a habit of spending time every day in prayer. So when deities comes, she already has time and habit, like time of the day, half an hour or 20 minutes or so. So she will not neglect the deities, because for a year she has been praying. So that time is designated for the deities. So I thought that was very, very useful in developing the habit and structure of your own day, because she's just working and living alone, no devotee association. I thought that was very useful for before you get the deities. That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Very nice point. Another question I'm seeing here, what's the role or standard of worshiping Shalagram Shila at the home and at the temple? So I guess the main point that I'd want to make about worshiping Shalagram Shila is that, like Prabhupada mentioned in that video, worshiping the Lord in the form of Shalagram is relatively easy in terms of offering more elaborate worship and more items and bathing than should you have a larger deity. That's one aspect, that's a practical aspect. So, one of the functions of Shalagram Shila in some of our temples is that, like for instance, we'll take Mayapur. Many of you, because the Radha Madhav altar, Astashakis, is so huge, you might not even notice that there's a little small Shalagram there, Janardan. And so that Shalagram, all the upacharas, all the primary rituals and the most elaborate worship is being offered to that Shalagram. And so that includes Panchamrit bathing, like milk, yogurt, ghee, honey, sugar, water every morning, and various other items. So functionally speaking, we can say that an advantage or a utility, for the lack of a better word, of worshiping Shalagram is that Shalagram is generally smaller, and so you're able to offer more elaborate worship, more items, and particularly if you're traveling, Shalagram is much more manageable to travel with and maintain worship like that. So there's these practical aspects. And we understand that also we don't install Shalagram. It's understood that Shalagram is a form of the Lord himself. So there's no pratishta that's involved. As opposed to when you have like a murti that is carved out of metal or wood or what have you, and then there's some aspect of invoking the Lord into that form. Okay, I think I caught up on the questions. Anything else? And if any of you would like to, offer a verbal question, that would be great for everyone to directly hear.
I have a couple questions that someone who is not on the Zoom cannot ask you, so they forwarded to me, but this is not about home worship. I understand this is deity worship in the temple. So is it okay, or?
My understanding is that we're gonna have some time. We're gonna have some time now to discuss some aspects with pujaris as well.
Whatever.
Yes,
I'll leave that.
That's. I think maybe we can end this session here of the home deity worship. We can give one more, and we can go around and ask if anyone has any questions related to home deity worship, and if anyone has, then they can ask now. Otherwise, we can close it and then we can move on to our next
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Worship.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, I have a question related
Yes, please.
to home worship. So Prabhuji, what about offering to deities when you are traveling? Like, if you go on vacations or you go on trips. So, if the whole family is going, most of us, of course, we do not carry our deities along. So how do we make sure that we are somewhat close to the standards? Of course, it's very difficult to always reach to the highest expectation levels,
Sure. Thank you for that question. Very important, very practical concern. I was touching on this earlier about different aspects of maintaining the worship while we're traveling. So am I to understand that there's no reasonable accommodation that can be made for the worship to go on while traveling? Meaning, there's no friend or family member at the home that can maintain the worship, and that there's no one nearby to take the deities to. So basically the deities are there. There's no one else to take care. You have to travel, correct?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we want to do our best to avoid this, but it happens. So it's kind of a basic answer, but you want to do the best you can. I mean, that's the point. Whatever facility we have, Krishna is not looking at what we give, but we're holding back. And so if it's all reasonable means have been exhausted to try to maintain the worship, but it's just can't happen. Okay, what can we do? So in that case, I mentioned that some devotees will offer some, we'll have some dried food stuff, what have you. If you're going away to India for a few weeks or something like that,
Right.
I would probably, there's not really much alternative. I would probably put them to bed.
Right.
And then wherever I travel, I'm there, at least have a picture. It's nice to have a picture of them. And so you can offer you can offer items to them via the picture wherever you are.
Right.
And then, and also, even if that's difficult, you can offer Manasa Puja.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Prabhuji. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay, well, thank you all so much for your, attending this. There's so much, detail that obviously in this format and the form that we can't go into. So we just touched some basics. But as I mentioned before, I encourage you all, if you want to, have hours of content on this topic, then please go to our YouTube site and you'll see there's a whole playlist for deity worship at home. Okay, so on that note, thank you so much. And,
thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Shamrupa Prabhu, you can stay on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.